Hi, I'm Jay Beaumont, and for the next half hour, I'm going to interview a raptor rehabilitator based in Louisiana. Letitia Labbie is the founder and CEO of Acadiana Wildlife Education and Rehabilitation. Her facility admits more than 200 patients annually, and the number is growing. She talks about great horned owls, Mississippi kites, and Louisiana's need for more volunteers to come forward. Letitia will be talking about issues affecting the conservation of Louisiana's raptors and owls right now. Working in rehabilitation and living the wildlife looks like this. Is sugarcane the standard habitat that you have to deal with around there?
Where I live locally, it's like a lot of sugarcane fields. There's crawfish fields. So we're an agricultural state. So we have a lot of different things that are grown. But right when they start cutting and burning the sugarcane, then rodents, rabbits, things like that are running away from that. And then the birds are hunting easy prey. They're not paying attention. They fly out in front of vehicles, or they're trying to eat roadkill and they get hit by a vehicle. So it's kind of common for me this time of year to get broken wings, head traumas, things like that at this time of the year.
So I'll start by asking Letitia, what do you do?
Okay, so I am a state and federally permitted wildlife rehabilitator, and I specialize in bird of prey. So I've been doing this since 1989 in the state of Louisiana. So quite a while. Got my own federal permits back in 1998. Before that, I was studying under someone else.
How difficult is it in Louisiana to get the necessary permits, Letitia? Because you're the only one in Louisiana, aren't you, doing
Well,
wildlife
there
rehabilitation?
I am one of three people or three that do birds of prey. And then there's a couple that do just primarily songbirds. There's a falconer who also rescues a few bird of prey, and a veterinarian in an LSU veterinary school, me and another lady that do bird of prey. But it's pretty difficult to get the permits. Under state law and federal law, you have to train under a permitted wildlife rehabilitator at their facility. That puts it in a kind of a bind because we're such a spread out state that when people want to come and become a sub-permittee, they may not have the ability to come over and train at my facility. And then on top of that, they have to start building their own cages, get their own facilities set up. And a lot of people, when they realize the expense of doing what I do, they usually panic and quit. So I start training someone and then they disappear. So it's a
Oh,
revolving door.
that must be quite soul destroying, I imagine.
It is. A lot of people think that they unfortunately they see a lot of YouTube videos and they see all these other videos where people are petting baby owls and they're making cutesy cutesy, and they don't realize that in our states and our country, it's against the law for them to do things like that. They're protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. So they're not going to be snuggling with baby hawks or owls. I mean, for the main purpose, we don't want them imprinting on humans. But the other fact that I'm covered in so many scars and I wear protective gear, we don't want to have people thinking they can make pets out of them, because when you release an imprinted hawk or owl, it becomes a dangerous bird. So that's another thing. But cost alone, I spend anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000 a month of my own money and donations to do the work I do. That doesn't even count the cages that I've built, the property that I had to purchase. It's crazy.
Does it
And we
take
don't
up
get
all your
fed with
time,
that.
Letitia? Does it
I'm
take up
sorry.
all your time?
It does. It takes pretty much from the minute I wake up in the morning to I go to bed at night. And sometimes I'll get phone calls in the middle of the night with injured animals. Takes up all my time, takes up all my money. Haven't seen a vacation in about 8 years, 9 years.
Wow.
So I
And
don't
it's
get, not
dedication.
even on holidays.
Wow. Wow.
So,
Why, Letitia? Why did you do it? Why? How did you get into this? Why do you do it?
well, I started out when I was a little girl. I was that kid that would go play in the woods all the time. And I would come home with a baby bunny or a baby bird or baby squirrel. And I ended up a teacher who was very similar when I was in fifth grade, who had bring baby squirrels, baby birds to class. She started sending them home with me. Then a wildlife and fisheries agent showed up at my house and said, you're not old enough to do this. So my father had to get permitted. I was 10 years old at the time. So my father got his permit. I did the rehab work with the tutelage of my teacher who would train me how to do it. Then when I moved to Louisiana, I was 18 years old and they had a group of rehabilitators over here. So I started training with them. Well, one by one, they got to an age where they were no longer doing rehab and they were ready to retire. So I ended up taking over. And so haven't stopped. I've been doing it ever since.
Here you are.
Um, my husband passed away about 8 years ago, and so I ended up purchasing 5 acres of land, thinking that would give me something to do, and I would start doing a larger scale rehab because we had lost a couple more rehabilitators due to age, and now I'm here every day.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
uh,
Letitia, what skills do you need to rehabilitate wildlife in Louisiana?
um, well, the hands-on training with the bird of prey is a necessity. I did have, but well, I was doing rehab for about 20 years before I was invited to start doing falconry. So I did a little bit of falconry. I became an apprentice falconer. But you have to have the ability to handle a dangerous animal, a bird. You have to know what types of food to properly feed them, how to properly handle them. We have minimum standard guidelines through the IWRC and WRA, which is International Rehabilitation Council and National Rehabilitation Council, um, regarding to cage sizing. I consult with veterinarians. I consult with falconers on different aspects of what these animals need. So it's just a lot of hands-on training. I, with my veterinarian, and I will discuss how to determine what injuries the animal has, and then what medication. And then just over the years, I've learned to do triage on the birds, figure out what injuries they have, and then when it needs more than what I can provide, I get them to a surgeon or I get them to a veterinarian who can offer more assistance, like prescribing the medications. Because I'm not a veterinarian, I can't prescribe medications, but I can administer the medications that are necessary.
Wow.
So,
Letitia, what skills does falconry provide that is useful in bird of prey rehabilitation?
um, so the falconry skills that I have added together with it is you learn the temperament of the type of bird you're rehabilitating. Like an accipiter is a more high-strung bird than a buteo. Great horned owls are a more secretive type of bird. They're very, you got to earn their trust, because the minute you lose their trust, they're going to starve themselves. They just won't even attempt to eat from you. You have to learn how to not imprint on birds. Some falconers will get a bird from the nest and they will imprint it. Well, rehabbers can't imprint on these birds. If you imprint on them, they become a non-releasable bird. So just learning the different ins and outs And then a lot of the falconers learn the medical stuff from me. So they get a bird that they don't quite understand what's going on with it. And I can kind of look at the bird and determine whether it's got a virus or if it's got something else that needs to be treated. So it's just different aspects of everything working together. Now, on the education side, the falconry has taught me how to man birds. So I do have a couple educational birds that are manned to the glove that I can bring around and show children or show groups and teach them about what I do as a rehabilitator. My birds aren't flighted, but that's how we still have to use the falconry skill set, the falconry equipment to do the proper manning for them. So.
Letitia, how challenging was it to find a veterinarian to help you?
I was very fortunate. So LSU Veterinary School in Baton Rouge has a program that's for veterinary wildlife rehabilitation. And that program uses their senior students. They volunteer their time and they do the rehabilitation. Well, when I started doing this over 30 years ago, one of the veterinarians who graduated from that program became a veterinarian over in our area, offered his services to me. And he does it for free, and he has been doing it for over 30 years. He loves working with bird of prey. And then the other fortunate thing I have is LSU Veterinary School is about an hour and a half away from me. So when I get certain birds that may need a pen surgery or need more care than I can provide, because I can't do eagles other than on a temporary basis. I don't have a 200-foot flight cage. My flight cage is only 50 foot. But I can do them for a temporary basis. And then those birds will get transferred over to LSU Veterinary School. After certain birds have had surgeries or they get birds that they don't have the expertise in, they'll transfer them back to me. So at least it's only an hour and a half away, to get them to them. So I was fortunate. A lot of rehabilitators have a hard time finding veterinarians that will work with them because they don't want to deal with wildlife.
LSU being Louisiana State University?
Yes. So LSU Veterinary School is in Baton Rouge, and they are actually attempting to open up a wildlife center where they can have, which will help our state a lot because they can provide training for those people who want to become a wildlife rehabber, give them the hands-on training, let them work with the animals that are there. And then if they want to venture off and learn, set up their own centers, they can. So that's one thing that we are working forwards in, because sustainability is going to be an issue. I'm not getting any younger, and neither are the other rehabilitators in the state. So we have to find somebody who's going to end up taking over what we do once we get beyond that time. Otherwise, we won't have anybody.
What about bureaucracy, Letitia? Is it very bureaucratic in Louisiana to do what you do?
It's the state paperwork isn't that hard to get. The problem is we are required to have federal and state paperwork, and federal paperwork is a lot harder to obtain. So you have to have your state paperwork first. You have to be inspected by the state. Usually the federal government will accept the state inspection, but we have to send them the cage descriptions, our education program information, our diets that we give for the birds. We have to photograph all of our equipment that we use with the birds. If I build a new cage, I have to send both the state and the federal government complete specs, photographs, dimensions of the cage. If they see something they don't like about it, they send it back and say, you got to fix this. So it's a lot of paperwork, a lot of red tape. And they don't pay us. We actually have to pay for our permits. So they regulate us, but they don't fund us at all. So that's how government paperwork works.
Wow. Letitia, what jobs are there in Louisiana with wildlife and particularly birds of prey?
There are no paying jobs. It's strictly a volunteer service. So if someone thinks that they want to become a wildlife rehabilitator and that they're going to make a lot of money, I spend money. I have pretty much depleted a couple savings accounts and eat ramen noodle soup sometimes when the birds are eating quail and mice. And I'm sitting here going, that quail sure looks good. We may have to share. But yeah, there's no paying jobs at all with wildlife rehabilitation. If we're lucky, we might get public donations. I do fundraisers on Facebook, and occasionally people will, out of their generosity, will hand you money to do a little bit of the rehabilitation. Doesn't cover all the costs, might cover your gasoline for the trip to go rescue it, but somehow it manages to work its way out. So, I haven't starved to death, and none of my birds have yet either.
Letitia, where's the strangest place you've lost a quail?
Lost a quail? Let's see. I've found them underneath bedding in the caging, like when I go to clean the cage, and I'm like, oh, yeah, you didn't eat that meal. I've thawed them out and forgot that I had them in the refrigerator, and they got shoved to the back of the refrigerator occasionally. I don't carry pouches or anything where they're in my pocket unless I'm doing training with the education birds. So I usually don't have anything left over in my pouch by the time I've given all the tidbits. But my cat and my dog have both occasionally stolen mice from my food bucket. And my puppy stole actually about 25 mice before I caught her and ate a $50 bag of food that was to go to birds. And occasionally the chickens have stolen mice too. Put the bowl down, turn around, and I've got 20 chickens running around with a dead mouse in there, and it looks like the Keystone Cops running around. So I have to be very careful with my mice. And then I am that person that when I've done a few soft releases on my property, a few of the birds have decided to stick around. So I have a red-shouldered hawk who decides to beg every day for a free meal. He taught his new girlfriend that the woman with the white bucket has free meals. And then I have a barred owl that comes every day for a free meal. And now the crows have decided that since everyone else is getting a free meal, we should also get one. So it's like Snow White walking around on the property and all the birds are following her. Yeah, except mine are hawks and owls.
That's brilliant. I love that. Letitia, for a student who's watching this, what is a soft release?
So soft release is basically we're hacking like a falconry hack. We have a young bird that reaches the age of fledgling, or we call them brancher babies. And depending on how many birds I have on my property, I will sometimes do a soft release at my property where the bird is in a hacking station, which is a box that they can sleep in. Then I provide them a food station where they can go and get the food. So they're learning to fly like they would with their parents, but I give them a backup in case they can't hunt. Some of my birds have realized that I have the word sucker written across my forehead. And even though they've proven that they can hunt because they've brought me presents before, they just see me walking around with the food bucket and they said, hey, she's got the meal, y'all come and get it. So I have a big heart, and I'm like, okay, here's 2 more mice. Now go find something else to do today. But yeah, every day they get a free meal, and some will come and knock on my window waiting for the meals. I've literally had my red shoulder hawk come sit under my deck on my back porch, and the barred owl has flown up to the window and is looking in and watching me as I'm drinking my coffee. And it's like, okay, seriously, give me 5 minutes. But the red shoulder hawk decided he thought I was his girlfriend for a long time. He built me a nest under my deck on top of one of my screech owl cages. So I have this beautiful red shoulder hawk nest up there, but his girlfriend decided she did not like it. But they have another nest in the oak tree on the back of my property, and the 2 of them have actually brought their babies to get free meals. So I'll sit there and start counting, and I'm like, hold up, there's 4 of y'all now. So, yep, all 4 will come and scream for a meal. And you know how red shoulder hawks, they scream very loud. And so the little beggar mites all get a meal. But yeah.
I love that. That's great. Um, Letitia, is there a large body of volunteers or potential interns in Louisiana who want to learn wildlife rehab and bird of prey rehab?
Unfortunately, no, not even on the mammal aspect of it. Um, a lot of people want to come and play with the birds. We would love for people who were serious about becoming rehabilitators. Um, but I think the paperwork scares them. I think the cost of the cages, my 50-foot flight cage cost me over $10,000. Um, so I think the cage costs scare them. The fact that you have so many regulations that have to be followed, like we're not allowed to let the general public come on the property to see any animal that's in rehabilitation. They can only see the birds there for educational purposes. It's just a lot of paperwork, a lot of red tape. Um, I wish it were different, but I understand why it's set in place because a lot of times people think, oh, I'm going to take this animal, I'm going to become TikTok famous by having this owl sitting on my shoulder like a parrot. And then they don't realize the federal government's going to swoop in and you get a federal fine and you get in trouble and, things like that happen. But I've actually seen it on TikTok and I'm sitting there going, what is this person doing? But the rules and regulations are set in to protect the animals. So I'm hoping that LSU will open up a wildlife center and then there will be more jobs openings for wildlife veterinarians. I mean, that would be awesome if we had more veterinarians that actually donated their services to people. A lot of the wildlife rehabbers over here have to pay for every service they get with a veterinarian. They have to pay for x-rays, surgeries, medications. I'm just fortunate mine doesn't charge me because I think I've brought in as many as 20 to 25 birds in 1 week to get x-rays and medication, and he does it all for free for me.
Oh, that's fantastic. Letitia, in general, are vets interested in wildlife or are they more, mixed domestic practice focused?
Um, Very few are interested in doing wildlife, just for the fact that there's a lot of zoonotic diseases that can be transmitted. If you're a veterinarian who does exotic birds, you wouldn't want birds coming in that could have West Nile virus or bird flu or something like that that can contaminate the birds that are in your care that you're getting paid to do. And then people who do dogs and cats don't want to run the risk of a raccoon coming in with parvo or rabies. One of their employees getting bit by a skunk or a squirrel, or, it happens. People will bring a squirrel in and it's not contained. And then they have Rocky, the, squirrel running around the veterinary clinic. And, so it's very few. I am that program at LSU is really good because they are training their veterinarians how to handle them. But I think a lot of the veterinarians are afraid to handle wildlife. I mean, I've had to have rabies shots, and mine was because I used to work with bats and used to work with raccoons, but also the fact that great horned owls will eat a skunk, and if they catch a skunk that has rabies, then I end up with an injured great horned owl and he still has the rabies on his talons, and I end up getting taloned. I've inoculated myself with rabies. Or if I take in an injured bat that possibly has rabies and I get bit, then at least at this point, I just have to have my titers checked. I'm not at high risk of catching rabies and dying, but because I've been inoculated. But there's a lot of, there's a lot of fear with big birds. I mean, sometimes people will not pick them up and won't touch them. A lot of times the public will transport them to me, but I've had some people who just are petrified of them and will not pick them up. So I've made a few 3 or 4 hour round trip rides to go rescue animals before.
Wow. Letitia, on the occasions when you do have contact with volunteers potential interns. What skills do you find they lack?
Um, it's just basically the hands-on skills. So I try to provide them with videos. If I haven't physically met the people, I provide them with videos on how to capture an injured animal and transport it. I have to give them instructions on what not to do because a lot of times, people will want to volunteer and then you see them taking selfies with a great horned owl next to their face. And it's like, oh, no, 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 no. You don't want to get attacked by a great horned owl. It's got talons, it's got a beak. And a lot of times it's just they honestly, I think they think that we get paid to do it. A lot of times they think we're part of the wildlife and fisheries once we become a rehabber. And so it's just education to let them know how to do it. Proper food, proper diets. So it's just the hands on. They have to put in at least 200 hours of hands on per species, I think is what the federal government requires. So usually 2 years, kind of like a falconry apprentice, 2 to 3 years before they can really get skilled. And even then, I've been doing it over 30 years and I make mistakes. You know, I'll reach in thinking a bird has head trauma and I take my glove off to go do something. And next thing you know, I'm handcuffed by a great horned owl who's got both hands. And I'm standing there going, okay, now what? So, I know what to do. I've sat there many a times with a bird handcuffed to me and just waited out until they decide they want to let go because there's no pulling them off of you. So.
Letitia, how can volunteers or interns get the skills that they often lack?
Well, they would have to get in touch with a permanent wildlife rehabilitator. They would have to let them know that they're interested in becoming a sub-permittee is what we call them. They would have to put in the time, the effort to go to that facility. They have to understand that it's not all, pretty and nice and fluffy and sweet. We have to deal with a lot of triage. So it's kind of like an emergency room setting. Sometimes you end up with a lot of blood. Sometimes you end up with exposed bones. Sometimes you end up with critters crawling on the bird that you don't, maggots, hippoboscid flies, lice. I mean, it's not pretty. It's not always beautiful, but then there comes when we finally do get to release, it's amazing because you've done all this work, you've put in all this effort, you've gotten a bird that you thought was going to be dead within 24 hours, and then you see it fly free again, and it's amazing. So, I mean, they would just have to be really willing to put in a lot of hard work. Volunteers usually are the ones who end up doing a lot of the pickup and transport. And I have to explain to people my radius is sometimes 3 to 4 hours away from my house. So I cover from one border of the state to the other border of the state to almost 2/3 of the state by myself. So I get calls from North Louisiana, South Louisiana, the Texas border. And so I have to get volunteers to go pick them up and bring them to me. Usually after they've done that, they're like, yeah, I'll just do this. I don't think I want to do the rehab part of it. It's like, okay, that helps me. I appreciate it. And I'll be calling you more than once. So.
You mentioned hippoboscid flies, Letitia. Do they have any redeeming features at all, or are they just completely disgusting?
So hippoboscid fly is a leech with wings. Um, they draw blood and they usually prey on vulnerable and sick birds. And they're pretty disgusting. And I can't say what my veterinarian sounds like when he gets them because they will actually go down into your clothing or into your hair. And he has literally ran out of the room sounding like a very young girl instead of a adult man. I have literally almost stripped down completely to my underwear in the backyard trying to get them out of my underwear. And more than one time I felt them in my hair and I'm like, oh, and I'm spraying myself down with so much bug poison that I could probably kill myself. But yeah, they're pretty nasty critters. But I think the mites are just as bad because you're sitting there holding a bird and you're examining it, and then you feel all these little bugs crawling up your arm. It's not that they would hurt a human, it's just, oh. It's like,
The X factor.
yeah, it's the ick factor. And then, maggots are just as disgusting, and bot flies are lovely too. So, yeah. Um, Lovely discussion for dinner time at, a restaurant.
Isn't it just? I felt I had to ask. I mean, they've got to have some friends. Their mothers love them.
I'm sure they serve some purpose. I'm sure the other hippoboscid flies think they're quite attractive. But for the most part, rehabbers, we pop them, kill them, stick them to duct tape, whatever we can to get rid of them. They're pretty nasty. So, and I'm sure the birds appreciate the fact that we're removing them from them because they're, can you imagine having a leech with wings just crawling all over you all the time, eating you and biting you? So yeah, not one of my favorite critters.
Um, Letitia, what questions would you like to see addressed or answered in the next 10 years regarding wildlife rehabilitation in Louisiana?
Oh, we would love to have some possible grants that would actually go in our direction to help us. It is so hard to find even family foundations that will provide us grants. Um, we would like to see, I would love to see an actual center at LSU set up because that would provide more people an opportunity to go see what rehabilitators do. It's difficult for me to invite people to my place and see what I do because this is my personal home. You don't want that many people wandering around on your facility at your property because you always have people who think they can come and do it at any time. But an actual facility where they can maybe charge a couple dollars, allow people to come in. If somebody wants to volunteer, they become a docent there. That would be really nice. And I know that they're working on that. Um, More cooperation from wildlife and fisheries. They really will not bring us animals at all. They said they tell people it's not their job. It's like wildlife and fisheries is not your job. Okay. We have to pretty much beg to get animals. Like I can occasionally get them to rescue an eagle and bring it, but they won't rescue anything else. They said that's not their goal. They are not set up to do that. And I think a lot of the enforcement officers are terrified of the birds. To be quite honest, a few of the female biologists and a few of the male biologists will go and get things for us, but I usually have to go and meet them. So even if they've rescued an eagle, I usually have to go and meet them like 2, 3 hours away or an hour away to get the bird from them. Sometimes they will bring it all the way to Baton Rouge, but it's very rare. Enforcement won't. The only time enforcement gets involved is if someone has something illegally. And even then, they'll call me and ask me to come meet them. So they will say, you go pick up the bird, we'll write the ticket. So more involvement would be nice. They say it's not in their budget. But grants would be amazing. Donations would be amazing. I spend probably every 2 weeks, I'll spend about $800 just on frozen mice and another $100 on live insects. I'm currently have 10 Mississippi kites that are wintering over because they missed migration. So they're getting provided with a heated area. So that's costing me an extra $100 a month in electricity.
Letitia, could you perhaps suggest a project for a volunteer or an intern?
Cages, we're always in, or mews, which like falconry caging, but flight cages are my biggest need right now. if Eagle Scouts, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, community groups, like sometimes the construction companies and stuff want to do a little community service work, that would be amazing to have a eel cage, or at least another 100-foot flight cage on my property, because a lot of times I'm transferring birds from one cage to the other cage so that I can give them flight time.
Is there any advice or anything else that you'd like to add?
Um, I'd like for people to be mindful of what, when they're cutting trees down. It'd be nice if the construction companies would actually leave tree breaks instead of clear cutting everything. A lot of the injured babies I get is usually from tree services cutting down trees with active nest in it. Um, the government would be nice if they would participate in ecology instead of money making events. So, I mean, I've moved out here and it was all woods and nature around me, and now I have subdivisions on every corner. So the birds, the migratory birds, are losing their habitat. Um, I'd like people to be nice to the rehabbers. We get stressed out, we get tired, and I can't tell you how many times I was told I need to do my job.
Really?
And it's like, okay, I'm a volunteer. I am doing my job, but yeah, I,
Sure,
I can be kind of mean back sometimes too, because yes, I'm the founder of Acadiana Wildlife Education and Rehabilitation. It's a 501(c)(3) nonprofit bird of prey rehabilitation.
Letitia, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Practical Animal Channel. Letitia Labbie,
It was a pleasure being interviewed by you.
thank you very much.